What's up, fight fans? It's Monday here. No, correction. It's not even Monday. It's Tuesday. Let's see. It is like the 3rd, 4th, 5th. Today's the 6th, I believe, of September 2016. Welcome. This is the Monday Morning Analyst. Now, we were off yesterday, so we didn't get this up, and it wasn't a very big card. I don't think it wasn't too much missed. But here we are today. Just wanted to go over the weekend's UFC card, which was not great. But there were a couple interesting things about it. One quick housekeeping note. Shout out to UFC Flyweight, The Last Samurai, right? Lewis Smolka, who sent me a note saying he watched the previous episode of this podcast where I broke down his fight with Ben Nguyen. Said he loved it. Said he was really impressed. So thank you so much for watching that, Lewis, and for everyone else who watched and liked that video. I really appreciate it. You guys are the best. Okay. Enough with that nonsense. Let's go to Saturday's event. This was UFC Fight Night 93, Barnett versus Arlovski. This took place at the Barclaycard Arena in Hamburg, Germany, in attendance of 11,763 for a gate of 913,428. Okay, in the main event, which we'll talk about more in the second segment, Barnett defeated Arlovski via rear naked choke or short choke at 2:53 of the third round. What do you want to say about this one? Crazy fight for the first 30 seconds, back and forth. They dropped each other. And then from there, it essentially became a wrestling contest. But for me, the big difference was Arlovski had most of an advantage on the feet, be it striking range or even in the clinch, just had a lot of ability to neutralize anything that Barnett wanted to do. If that fight had stayed on its feet and the cardio had been relatively the same, relative to each guy anyway, I think Arlovski would have won. And Arlovski's hard to get down, man. He's super hard to get down. But Barnett is crafty, super crafty. And we'll look at that in the second segment about some things he was able to do. But that fight was won and lost basically on the ground, basically. Okay, in the light heavyweight co-main event, Alexander Gustafsson defeats Jan, and I've been mispronouncing this guy's name forever. Blachowicz, apparently. I thought it was Blachowicz, but whatever. Blachowicz, 30-27s across the board. Boy, Alexander Gustafsson, what do you want to say about this guy? When he fights the best, he shows up and looks like a world beater. And when he fights guys he should beat, he looks better than them, but not... Well, I guess the Manimal fight, of course, he won quite handily. But anyway, in this particular one, I felt like he fought down to that competition. I felt like he really needed this fight, man. He needed a tune-up fight. He needed to get in there with somebody who he could manage and control, not take a ton of damage, although he was getting pieced up a little bit in that first round by Blachowicz, but in the end, the wrestling superiority by Gustafsson and the control on the ground was all you really needed. Didn't like some of the stand-ups in that fight in terms of what the referee's choices were, but Gustafsson got the job done. What's next for him? I wouldn't mind seeing him take on another contender. If Jones comes back relatively soon, that would be a great one. I don't know that they will, but you get the idea. So I guess we'll see what happens. But not a strong showing for Gustafsson, but maybe the right kind of fight that he needed. Ryan Bader defeating Ilir Latifi via KO knee, 2:06 of the second round. Jesus, man, that was incredible. Latifi does a lot of ducking, and I thought for sure it wasn't going to be the knee. I thought it was going to be actually an uppercut from Bader. But Bader, you notice he sort of like walks in, walks out, walks in, walks out of range. And I don't mean loosely. I mean like he almost like Machida blitzes a little bit. In fact, that's how Machida got him, if you'll recall. Because Bader loves to sort of lurk on the outside a little bit and then come quickly inside. But Latifi just kept ducking, and paid for it in the end. And that was after Bader got dropped in the first round. So really nice, strong showing in the end there by Bader. A lot of composure. That veteran experience really showed for him there. Nick Hein defeated Tae Hyung Bang in the worst fight ever imaginable, 29-28, 30-28, 30-27. I don't have anything to say about it. Jasin Ayari defeated Judo Jim Wallhead. This one was a little bit controversial. 28-29, 29-28, 30-27. 30-27 is not justifiable under any circumstance. Jasin Ayari, we'll see what he can do at welterweight. Rising prospect, had some decent striking on the outside, fluid. Tough out for Jim Wallhead, but he didn't look bad either. Peter Sabota really shocked me, defeating Nicholas Dalby 30-26 across the board. He manhandled Nicholas Dalby, and Dalby is tough, but I have not seen enough progression from him. I don't know if he's getting the right kind of training, because he looked like somebody who could really be something out of that European scene. And I'm not here to minimize and say he's not anything. He's a lot. But I'm not seeing these major progressions fight over fight. Peter Sabota was a guy I'd written off a while ago, and he looked phenomenal. So totally wrong about Peter Sabota. Strong on the ground, great timing with his strikes. The precision of them was surprisingly good as well. Like, there was a lot to like about Peter Sabota's effort. Ashley Evans-Smith taking on Veronica Macedo. beats her via TKO versus elbows, 3:14 of the third round. Macedo's just too green, just way too green. Obviously, she's got some decent striking prowess, but I think she's a little small for the weight class. And what you just saw there with Evan Smith was the ability to control her in every circumstance on the ground. Once it was there, she was making these really weird, bad calls about how to defend herself and going for these really inexplicable non-set-up knee bars. Like you go for a knee bar after it's set up. Not like you can't roll in, like you can't force your way into the setup unless you're going against someone who's not really resisting, especially someone who's not punching you in the face. So I think Macedo's really good, but I saw someone, and I can't remember who, so forgive me, who said she should be in Invicta right now, not the UFC, and I think I agree with that. Taylor Lapilus defeating Leandro Issa, 237s, 129-28. Lapilus looked really good, but not showing enough of the finishing skills I'm expecting from him, but his striking generally coming along quite nicely. Christian Colombo defeated Jarjis Danho. I mean, this is the worst fight. I mean, whatever you want to think about the Nick Hine versus Tae Hyung Bang fight, Jarjis Danho versus Christian Colombo is arguably one of the worst fights the UFC could make with its modern roster. Like, if you just looked at who on this roster could you put together to create the worst fight we could create, that would be up at the top of the list. And I don't know why Jarjis Danho is in the UFC. He should be released. He's not ready for this level. Jack Hermanson, now this was a good fight, defeated Scott Askham, unanimous decision, 30-27, 30-27, 29-28. Hermanson, I guess he's a Swede living in Norway, something to that effect. Scott Askham, of course, well-known guy out of the UK scene. Hermanson and Askham were having a lot of, it's not stalemate exactly, but they were, go back and watch the fight, to the extent they were striking on the outside, it's relatively even. It was once, and Hermanson takes a while to heat up. You saw that in his last fight before this one in Venator. It takes a while to heat up, but once he gets into punching range, he's got really nice power and a good jab. And he had trouble with the jab, but what he was able to do was find his way inside the clinch and then brutalize Askham in that space. And once it was, normally you actually don't want a guy to go headhunting. It was actually in this fight that the headhunting by Hermanson, again, once he was able to work through that distance issue, was really what won him the fight. So, nice job by rising middleweight Jack Hermanson. I'm looking forward to seeing more from him. He needs to tighten up some certain things, but he's a prospect, so that'll come, I suppose. And then lastly, Rustam Khabilov defeating Leandro Silva in also not a great fight. Khabilov lost the first round handily and sort of worked his way back into the fight the best that he could. But Khabilov, another guy whose progress has been a little bit uneven of late. The fight of the night went to Josh Barnett versus Arlovski, and performance of the night went to Josh Barnett and Ryan Bader. I would agree with that. I would give my fighter of the card to Barnett. I'll give it to Barnett. Okay, with that said, not going to go over the whole main event. There's not enough to look at for a big full-on breakdown, but there's enough to look at in terms of some of the takedowns and what the takedowns meant for Mount and what the Mount meant for Josh Barnett. So without further ado, let's look at some film. So let's just say one thing real quickly about this fight, and we'll just look at a few of these slides. I think I only have just enough to look at some takedowns here. I'm not saying that things that happen on the feet weren't important. They, of course, are. The first 30 seconds of this fight was crazy. You get the idea. But I just want to sort of focus in on some of the takedowns here because I thought this was a really interesting part of the fight and was a real big unknown heading into it. Because here's the truth about Andrei Arlovski, right? He's hard to take down. He's real hard to take down. If you come at him with traditional takedowns, either against the fence, off the fence, sweep singles, treetops, singles, doubles, high crotches, ankle picks, John Smith low single, he's got pretty good takedowns defense for all that. I'm not saying you couldn't do it, but man, it might be kind of hard, right? And you're going to see that Josh Barnett tries to take him down off the fence and never really ever gets close. But he does get him down a couple of times, and I think that is a really important story to this fight. It was that craftiness that really matters here. But, Arlovski is very, very, whatever else you want to say about him, man, the guy is hard to take down. And I think it's instructive because in the first round, which we're going to look at here, Arlovski gets him down. Now, I don't think his takedowns are as good as his takedown defense, but they're pretty good. But what you're going to see is, while Arlovski's takedown defense was good and technical, and I think that's a fair way to put it, was a little bit loose. And in the course of doing that, what you're going to see is Barnett makes him pay for it, right? And then, of course, Barnett just turns into Barnett in that third round, and we'll look at that as well. But just want to make that point up front about Arlovski. He's got underrated takedown defense, man. He is hard to get down on that mat. maybe now more than ever. And Barnett, to get him down there, had to really kind of think things through a little bit here. All right, so they're tied up in what's called a 50-50 clinch. One guy has an overhook, one guy has an underhook. Now, here's the truth about it. When you're locked up in these kinds of positions, there's all different kinds of takedowns. When someone has double underhooks on you, you can do a lateral drop. When you get both your underhooks in, you can do a body lock trip. And they require a number of different things. They require, your body needs to be at a certain angle. Your hips need to be a certain distance apart. And here's the truth. There's a lot of coaches who will tell you that, like, this is the right way to do this kind of takedown. This is the wrong way. And they'll have their own variety of inside trip or outside trip. And they may have that from jiu-jitsu or from some wrestling coach or from a sambo coach or from a judo coach or whatever. Here's the truth I found in these positions. It's a lot of different feel, and there's a ton of variety here. So there really is no one way to do things, and we should really keep that in mind. However, even though you might have one takedown that you call an outside trip, and I have a different takedown I call an outside trip, there's still a right way to do the one I'm talking about and a wrong way, and there's a right way to do the one you're talking about and a wrong way. So what we should allow for, my point being, is there's a lot of variety here. But even within that variety, there's still right and wrong. And I'm not going to say what Arlovski does is wrong, because you'll see there's a lot to it that's correct. But what makes the difference for Barnett in the end is the looseness of the position. All right, so let's look at some of these slides here, and you'll see what I mean. Okay, so here we are. Arlovski's got like a 50-50 clinch. Again, one over, one under. So the idea is, if you're Barnett, he's going to want to take you to that side, right? Because that way you're going to drive the elbow down. You're going to lift that underhook. You're going to get him to turn. Some guys may not clinch here. What they may do is they may grab onto a lat. They may, really drive that elbow inside. A lot of different things. Just to be clear here, you might be saying, I've seen these guys hold their hands in different positions. To me, this is a weak position. That's just me personally. It may not be weak at all for Andrei Arlovski. To me, the two strongest positions or where someone might low bar squat. So there's there's really three kinds of squats, but there's two major kinds of squats. High bar squat, where you use the traps of your back to build a wall and a shelf for the bar to sit on. And there's another kind where you can lean forward just a little bit and you put it on the back of your delts, the rear delts here. So that to me is one strong position, is if you had your arms double underhooks hiked up underneath or right around the belt line. You can get hip to hip on someone. You can be the controlling person in those exchanges. Man, you get hip to hip and they're in big trouble. You're essentially attaching them to you, and then you're in the driver's seat. You can imagine that would be bad for them, right? But this is 50-50, so you got to make some adjustments. But what you're really going to see in virtually every kind of 50-50 exchange is the free underhooking hand is going to drive up. The outside overhooking hand is going to drive down. That's what you're really kind of looking for the most part. And this leg is going to be what determines what the leg is going to do is what kind of takedown you're attempting. And there's a variety of them here. So let's see what Arlovski does. So you can see automatically here's what he's trying to do. And you can see how much tighter that grip got all of a sudden too. Look at the sort of shape of Barnett. You can see his muscles and skin being pushed up here, and everything is sort of being bunched up as a consequence. Arlovski doing the right thing. This may sound obvious to you, but it's not. Trust me. A lot of beginners will put their head on the wrong side. He has his head on the same side as the tripping leg. Believe it or not, that matters. Okay, so what are we looking for here? All right. When you look at this, what do you see? You see Arlovski attempting a takedown, but for me, it's not in an optimal position. Again, it's a live UFC fight, okay? You got to be a little bit forgiving of these guys. So it's not always going to be textbook. When it is, we'll give a guy praise, but it's not always going to be, and it doesn't always have to be, and it's not in this particular case. But that's not the worst thing in the world. However, there are some problems here. Barnett's head is kind of facing the Fram logo, but his hips are kind of facing the Bud Light logo, and that's okay. But for Arlovski to make this kind of trip work, he's got to have the inside of his thigh on the outside of his thigh. You can see he's got like the outside of his calf there. He needs to be rotated over a little bit more. He attempted this. You can see when Barnett was facing this way. Now he rotates Barnett. Look where Barnett is facing now. He does rotate him a little bit, but he never gets him to step. He actually steps with the left leg. So he kind of, it's just a bit of an awkward attempt. Not saying it won't work. In fact, it does. But this is why Barnett's going to take advantage of it later. So let's finish this through. So he gets it, again, this is not optimal at all. He's almost like if Barnett pushed forward here, Arlovski would go straight back. He's a little bit off balance here. But what Arlovski's looking to do is rotate it over where he's supposed to be or not. He's going to look to block this leg and then get Barnett to go sideways. He will also go sideways, but because he will be lifting here and pinching here, it's going to get Barnett to go back, onto his back, that is, and it's going to get Arlovski to come up. So let's take a look at that. So you can see that here. He's going to drive this underhook forward, and he's going to come out on top. Now, here's the interesting part. I've always said this. This is a good rule of thumb on a takedown. How do you know you're in the right spot on a takedown or in the middle of one? It's because your hips will be the one closest to facing the mat. Now, in this particular moment, it looks like Barnett's are, but it doesn't last, and there's a nice little trick that Arlovski pulls to get this. And then, of course, you can see whose hips are facing the mat now, Arlovski. But this is the key. So here we are. Look at it. Their hips are kind of far apart for me. That back leg is back. If I were Arlovski, I would have wanted to pull Barnett in a direction that gets this foot to step and then go for it. But you know, who am I? I'm a donk on my computer. But okay, but still, I still believe that would have been better, because you can see this is not, I mean, this is just so not optimal. Like, you need to be rotated over and around to do it. Not all the way. You don't have to be like a 90-degree angle, because that would be a different body lock trip, and that would also require double underhooks, but this is still not quite where he needs to be. Yeah, let me look at that. You would want the inside of this thigh out here. Not, he's got inside of his thigh on the front of Barnett's thigh. That's not quite right. Look, if Barnett drove forward, what would happen? He would go right to his back, which is why when he first did this, it looked like a bit of a sacrifice throw. But okay, I'm picking on Andrei too much. So Andrei kind of lets that go, and you can see he's moving. He's going to make the attempt. This is what he does differently. You see this? Look here real closely. Hooked on the, trying to go calf to calf here, but it's not going to work. Steps down, whoop, and then sweeps the foot out. That is a nifty little trick. I had not seen that before. So here's what I'll say about Arlovski. His first attempt was not that great, but you can see in this position, he's got a lot of tricks. Maybe he knew, I know this is not a good position to start, but I know even starting from a bad one, it'll open up this for me. And this is why Barnett, even though it looked like for a second he had superior hip position on the throw, ends up on his back. He gets foot swept, essentially, at the end. And then Arlovski pinches down and then throws this overhook, this underhook over the top. And then they go down. And actually, you see he lands. This is how he wanted to land all along. Both guys on their side, one guy on top, his hips are facing the mat, his hips are facing up. But you see how they're kind of on the side of the leg of Arlovski? That's the optimal ending, or at least, crash position. Not the ending position, but the crash position. And then you sort of come up on top when you have the superior, you've got this underhook and everything else. You're the guy who's going to win that scramble at that point, especially at heavyweight. So here's what I'll say about Arlovski. Very suboptimal starting position. Very nice adjustment to finish it. Now, this is instructive, though, because in the second round, Barnett is like, I think I have some ideas. And Barnett has made a lot of guys pay for loose takedowns. Again, not sloppy. That's not quite true. I think Arlovski is really comfortable in this position, right? This clinch position. Obviously, he's a Sambo champion, right? He's going to have a lot of tricks from here. So I think he just felt comfortable in it, but maybe a little too comfortable. All right, so here we are. All right, so they're rotating. You can see they're kind of rotating this way. They're kind of dancing a little bit. A lot of guys will tell you need to have a gable grip or a C grip. C grip doesn't feel very strong to me personally in this position. He's got what I call a three-finger grip. You'd be surprised what you can do with a three-finger grip. Maybe he just likes it better, I don't know, but just something to notice. All right. Here goes Arlovski, same side, head on the same side as the tripping leg. You can see underhook is going to drive up, overhook is going to drive down. They go to the same side, the left side again. What is different this time, though? So far, looks all the same. Arlovski appears to be getting that nice outside thigh position. I mean, look at that, right? That looks pretty good. The inside of Arlovski's thigh on the outside of Barnett's thigh. Wow, that seems like what we want, right? So what goes wrong? Here's what goes wrong. What did you notice there? All right, go back here. Okay, what did you notice there? Here's what I noticed. What ends up happening is it's loose, and you're going to see this from a different angle, and you'll see a little bit better. And what ends up happening is Barnett, while still knowing Barnett's going to go to the ground no matter what on this. But it's not about going to the ground. A good takedown is, yes, you go from up to down, but you have to control the other person through the motion, right? That's the whole idea, especially in MMA where you need to get on top of that joker. You can't just do like a whipping Karo Parisi and Harai Goshi, they go flying over, you go flying with them, and then you both just stand back up again. Right? You got to control them through the beginning to the end of the process. And you don't get that here. And here's the other part about that. What winds up happening is, look where Arlovski's left leg is. Remember the takedown we're trying to do. The takedown we're trying to do is you're trying to get someone, you're trying to block them here. And they're going in a circle. So Barnett, at a minimum, is going to land straight down to the side here if this goes properly. More likely, he's going to land almost on that Reebok UFC wording. Like they're going to whip around in a circle. That's how you're going to go. Okay? It's a counterclockwise motion here. It's not just straight. But definitely what you're using is you're using your leg to block their leg, and then you're whipping them over it. Right? That's how this particular takedown works. But look what happens. Arlovski plants on the front leg, and here's Barnett way out in front of him. Well, that's not how that's supposed to be. Right? I mean, Barnett would need to be like here-ish, or maybe even here-ish, like over the lettering, or at least like right here. Barnett's out in front. Here's what happens. Barnett actually figures out that foot positioning and the hip positioning of Arlovski is not optimal. Arlovski realizes it too and lets go of the trip to plant this leg. Okay? But what happens when he plants this leg is that gives space to Barnett to do the old Fred Flintstone when he's trying to get his car started. And what you'll see is that Barnett stutter steps to change the angle, make it back and looping out to the other side. I mean, it's the same kind of motion, but a different arc, a much different arc. And what that allows Barnett to do is to then change the direction of the throw mid-throw. So now what Barnett is doing is running in a circle at a different arc, and he's sacrifice throwing, dragging Arlovski around the collar to him as he rotates in one continuous motion. That's what he's doing. There's a couple more details here we should go over. But that's what's happening here. Barnett should be over here, here. Well, actually, no. Barnett should be sort of like here-ish when he lands, and it could be even here depending on how much of a whip Arlovski wants to get on it. But he has his feet too far apart. He has to plant to stop himself from being off balance and realizes it. What happens is that looseness gives Barnett a chance to shuffle his feet, redirect the throw, yank Arlovski down, and then he uses this other leg to kick while he uses the other side to block in a one rolling motion. Again, this is all one motion. You can't pull someone to the ground, then start your scramble. It's all one quick motion, right? It looks like it's broken up, but only because it's hard to execute any other way. But it's a one continuous shot, and then he comes up on that elbow. Now he's on his hip. He scoops the leg, and he comes out on top. Like, that is nasty. Now look at this from a different angle. There he is right there, right? Again, this is better than the first one. This angle, but Arlovski needs to be a little bit more over, a little bit more rotate, not a huge amount, but just more. Now he does have that front, the leg he's stripping. Remember before it was back, this time it's front. So okay, that's better. Let's keep looking. So this is a better angle. He's almost got the inside of the leg on the outside of the thigh of Barnett, but the problem is look at how far apart his feet are. I mean, think about this. If you wanted to trip someone, yeah, you have to extend one of your legs away from the other leg. But there's a point of diminishing returns where you're extending yourself so far, you're creating a weak structure. And now your balance can become compromised. Like, when are you most balanced? You're most balanced, to go back to the squatting analogy where we're talking about the high bar versus the low bar squat, you're light. Now, there might be some variance on this. Of course, there's lots of variance on squatting. But think of it this way. Where are you strongest in the squat? Probably in the same, not always, but probably in the same position where you're going to be, say, jumping as high as you can, right? Imagine someone to start from the floor and jump as high as you can. So now think about how far apart your feet are. That's your most balanced position. You can play with that a little bit. It's not saying if you move 1 inch away from that, you'll be totally unbalanced, but you get the idea. Imagine if your feet were now this far apart. He's curling it in, but think about where his leg would naturally fall. That's pretty far apart, man. That's a little bit not optimal. You kind of want to be in a lot tighter than that, and you want to be whipping Barnett in this direction, this way down. So let's see what happens. So look, he has to plant his leg to run this thing through because he can't finish. He can't plant his weight and finish. He's too far out. There's no stability there. He'll fall, or it just won't work. So what happens is Barnett is able to use that retraction now that he's planting on it to then shuffle his feet, run around, And what he's going to do is, rather than falling at the angle he was supposed to, like here-ish, he's going to redirect the arc to go wide, and then he's going to whip Arlovski into himself as he crashes, uses a hook, and rotates him over like that. Now, one quick note. This is not about the takedowns. I've been mentioning this before, and I had some people on Twitter expressing some skepticism about it, which is perfectly okay, but I guess it's worth reiterating the point. I've made it before, and I'll make it again. Mount is a lost art in modern mixed martial arts. Mount is frankly a lost art in modern jiu-jitsu, but it's definitely a lost art in mixed martial arts. And people have said, why? Is that guys are getting better at escaping the mount? I mean, some guys are, like your super high level ones, maybe, but not really. There's a ton of common mount escapes or reversals, and you barely see any of them. You barely see any of them. What you basically see are guys who are scared to go to mount because they don't know how to hold it properly, and guys who, when they get mount, they have one maybe really good escape, and then that's it. And since the other person on top hasn't really worked on it, that just goes away. Here's the truth about mount. Mount is like 7 different mounts. It can be broken down to usually three different mounts, but the point being is there's a lot of different mounts. I mean, 7 mounts is an exaggeration, but I'm just trying to point out that when you think of mount is not one kind of mount. They're all different kinds of mount, and it's that one fluid position that you have to have all these different bases covered depending on what you want to do. I just want to point out something here. This is the strongest mount in my estimation. Why? Because what you're doing is, if you're Barnett, you are squeezing their legs and you are driving your hips down. Barnett is squeezing his lower back, maybe even squeezing those glutes together, and he's driving his hips forward. And he has scooped Arlovski's elbow. He doesn't have the far elbow, so this is not the most dominant mount, but this is like 90, 95 out of 100 if we're grading the mount. This is a big brother mount right here. Driving your weight down, grapevine the legs, you hook the elbow, you have separated the elbow from the body. Again, when the elbow's away from the body, that is a very, very, very weak position. Bro, you're going to get hurt up in this one. Now, look, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but just look real quickly. Now he's got a second kind of mount where he is sitting his hips back. He's on his knees. He's got his heels tucked underneath. So he is sitting on the hips, kind of, right? But he is not flattening him out. Hips are kind of like here. He's going to let go of this to throw some strikes. That is different than this position, where here he's sitting back a little bit, kind of leaned over, wrestling with Arlovski. There's going to be a moment where he actually sits his hips up. That's a different position. Trust me. They do different things, right? One thing, where's all your weight? It's only on his knees here. Where's the weight? Partially on his knees, partially on his rear end. Changes it up and goes here. And then this goes on. This is another one where he's sort of wrestling with Arlovski here, and he puts him back down. I just want to point out something. I could go into much finer detail about this, but let it be known, Josh Barnett has maybe one of the best heavyweight mounts I've ever seen. Why? Because mount is not one position. Mount is a number of different positions for a number of different scenarios, each of which requires mastery. We call it one thing. We just call it mount. It's not. It's a lot of different mounts put together, and he's got all of them. Now, of course, Arlovski's not going buck wild trying to get out of it, and I'm not saying Arlovski is some major mount escaper. You're going to be like, well, Barnett was beating up on a guy that was tired. All of that is true. I'm just trying to tell you, I've seen enough of Josh Barnett's mount to tell you that this is a guy you can tell right away. He has done his homework on the different kinds of mounts for different scenarios. Setting up perhaps a submission attack where you still would want your hips low, right? Trying to sort of maybe hand wrestling here, something here where you still want to keep your hips down, but when you strike, you want to put your hips up. And that's exactly what he does here. That gives you maximum amount of force on your strikes. And he does this effortlessly, instinctually. Mount is a lost art in mixed martial arts. Guys don't put nearly the same amount of effort into it that they used to. And maybe there's a reason for that to some extent, but I think that what you're going to see is there's going to be some kind of a return to it. And if you're a heavyweight, you should watch what Josh Barnett does, because this guy is a master at it. Very, very good mount. Keeping going. All right, you can see him wrestling here. Last one. This is the last takedown. We'll be done with this. Again, you try and double and single leg Andrei Arlovski, it's really going to be quite difficult to get him to the floor. So Josh Barnett tries something very different. He gets this Kimura. He sits into it. I think this is to create hand separation, but I'd have to talk to him more to understand it. Maybe he was trying to roll on this first one. I think it was merely just trying to get hand separation because here he's got his hands connected. I think what Barnett wants to do is sit his hips through to break that grip. And then what he does is he just rolls backwards. Now, this is interesting because normally the way they teach this is you want to have this leg hooked before you roll. And what, not hooked, but like, you know, as you want to have this shin in between their legs before you roll so that once your back goes down, you just flip them over. Barnett does it after the fact, but you know, again, he knows this position a lot better than I do. Maybe there was some other mechanical issue that prevented him from doing it. I'd have to talk to him. So just sort of pointing out, he does it in a different stage. I'm not critiquing it. I'm just observing. And he then puts the leg in and rolls him over. And here's the other interesting part. Once you roll them over like this, there's a couple different ways. If they go over hard, you can actually hook your own leg, and then their own body weight going over will carry that with you. That's one way to do it, right? Or what you can do is, and this is what I think Barnett does, he has to, when he goes, he can't rely on this hook to get the job done. So what he has to do is essentially either drive off with this leg, but either way, with his own abs, you have to like put your legs up and like kick into the air. You have to kick up as you do it. And it's actually quite difficult. Hang on a second. I'm botching this. Okay. Here we go. You can see that. Look, he has to kick up in the air, and then this is the best part. Look at him on his. It's essentially like a Granby roll, what he has to do here, and then he comes out on top, and I think he actually scoops half guard himself. But real quickly, this is critical, and the timing of this has to be right on the money. Once they go over, he's ass over tea kettle. You have to essentially. I mean, just think of it this way: lay on your back, put your knees to your chest. You don't hold them there with your hands, but just put them up. And then kick your legs in the air. But as you kick your legs in the air, such that all your hips come off the ground, and then roll yourself over your shoulders. So you have to come up. I mean, a lot of people could do that and then roll over backwards, and then sort of like, you know what I mean? Like almost like a backwards roll. But try doing that upwards and then on a side and then coming over. That is, dude, that's hard to do as a heavyweight, man. That's super hard to do. You can tell this is something he has done a billion times. A lot of guys will just come out on top. What they'll do is they'll roll, right? Look where he's facing. You see his hips change directions. He would just roll on top. I'll just get right on top of you. He doesn't do that. He comes off to the side, homie. Old Josh Barnett got some tricks. It's amazing, man. It's amazing. So, you know, what's the difference between catch wrestling and jiu-jitsu? I mean, lots of different things, but some of it might be ability in different kinds of positions from different kinds of situations. And I think this is another case of that. And then, of course, he gets on top. From here, Josh Barnett, I think he actually took half guard himself. Like he put himself in it. And then he closes the show. He finished with what he called a short choke. And a short choke is essentially like, imagine you go for a Jeremy Horn has a good video on this. Imagine you're going for a normal rear naked choke. They peel the high hand. And Matt Hughes did this to, like, Frank Trigg, or you can name any number of situations where you have a rear naked choke. They peel the high hand, so you roll the high hand back and you get a gable grip. They call that a short choke. Maybe Barnett has a different thing for short choke, but that's certainly the way it was explained by most observers of jiu-jitsu. But again, he's catch wrestling, so who knows? Okay, so there you go. Pretty cool effort by Josh Barnett. Once he found a way to get to the mat, there was a clear differential. I think we saw some of that a little bit in his mount. And, Arlovski's good, man. He's obviously really talented in that clinch position, but just a little bit of looseness cost him in the end. All right, and last but certainly not least, let's take a look at what's coming up in the week ahead. Now, here's the truth. There is a ton of, like, regional MMA or international level MMA outside of UFC. So here's what I'll do. If something really spectacular happens on one of those cards, I'll try to highlight it for the next episode of the podcast. But obviously our big focus is going to be UFC 203. So that will take place at the Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland, Ohio, baby. September 10th, of course, which is next Saturday. Main event, Stipe Miocic will defend his heavyweight title against Alistair Overeem. Fabricio Verdum will rematch against Travis Brown. Phil Brooks, otherwise known as CM Punk, will face off against Mickey Gall. Uriah Faber against Jimmy Rivera. That fight is being slept on. Jessica Andrade versus Joanne Calderwood rounds out the main card. You move to Fox Sports 1. Jessica Ai versus Betch Kohea. A big fight for Jessica Ai, man. Nick Lentz taking on Michael McBride. Kyle Magalhaes taking on Brad Tavares. Ian McCall versus Ray Borg. Remember, Ian McCall was supposed to fight Justin Scoggins. And then we have in the Fight Pass portion of the card, Yancy Medeiros taking on Sean Spencer. CB Dalloway versus Francimar Barbosa. And that'll be at light heavyweight. And then Drew Dober taking on Jason Gonzalez. So there'll be more to get to next week, but that's to be the primary focus of the podcast. Any questions, corrections, or comments, luke.thomas@sbnation.com. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and share. Really appreciate it when you do. And until next time, enjoy the fights.